Benjamin, I call you Ben. Is that all right?
Yeah.
First of all, Benjamin Leyland, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
We're really happy to have you.
I'm very happy to be here.
So what I wanted to ask you before we start the interview is you recently posted an ask on Instagram asking shoe companies to make women's shoes above a size 10. How come?
That's funny. You said you'd start with an icebreaker. It's definitely an icebreaker. I've almost exclusively been buying from the women's rack for a while now. The men's selection is just pretty boring and monochromatic. And my gender identity is something which I like to play around with. It definitely, love the look of women's clothes and I love the look of women's shoes. So when I have a size 11.5 foot,
yes,
I constantly find myself dreaming a dream and then finding out that it's not possible.
It's dashed.
So come on, guys.
It's above a size 10 in women's shoes. Can you describe your footwear today?
My footwear is outlandish, flamboyant, over the top, and requiring an inner sole to give me the cushion that I require.
Yes. What color is it?
Well, it's multiple, like, flowery pinks. It's the only thing I've ever bought off Instagram, but yeah, I lent into my impulsivity, my sober impulsivity,
yes,
which is the same as my addicted
impulsivity.
It's just a different word on the front.
Right.
Yeah.
I like that.
I'm checking them out again right now. I'm sorry. I moved away from the mic.
No, I know. Yeah. They are distracting. We should maybe do an entire show, like, on just the shoes.
We'll have to get a picture of them before
You'll have
you
to
leave.
remind me.
Yeah.
We'll get a picture.
I will.
And I am the king of monochromatic, by the way.
Oh,
yes.
yeah. No, you do it well.
Thank you. Yeah, I've tried to refine it.
Thank you for that. I am Laura Cathcart Robbins, and this is the only one in the room. But I'm never the only one in this room because, as usual, my co-host, producer, boyfriend, Scott Slaughter, who I call Hun, is here as well.
Hi, honey.
Hey, honey.
Hey, you threw in a boyfriend. That's new.
What do I usually call you? I forgot
When
I was saying it.
It's so good. It's a new start to a new year.
I think I usually say boyfriend first, but anyway.
It's funny because he's my boyfriend too.
Ah.
I'll go there, man.
It's all coming out now.
We're going to have a fight. I was also going to mention that Serena, our dog, is in the room as well. So
right. She's been in the last few interviews.
She has. And you won't even know she's here. She's so quiet.
She's safe energy, by the way.
Yeah. So we are talking, like I said, I call him Ben Leyland. He's Benjamin Leyland. Ben goes by he/they, prefer they, though, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So you're a life coach and writer. You help other people better understand themselves, their motivations, their blind spots, with the hope of recovering their primitive and provocative authenticity. You wrote this.
Obviously.
Yes, obviously.
Yeah. It's got my flair.
So you are a director at a mind, body, soul wellness brand, All Points North, like the compass, right? All Points North. Behavioral health provider dedicated to destigmatizing mental health and providing new front doors to wellness. I like that, the front doors. And also, for those of you who are listening, who have been listeners of ours, Ben brought us Sino, who was like one of our top downloaded episodes, right, hon?
Fantastic.
And fantastic story. And Cole Richmond, who we loved. They were both, I think, in the spring of 2022. So if you're going back in the catalog, check out those episodes. So you've been a terrific friend to the show. And I hope you keep bringing us great people too. But now you've brought us yourself.
Yeah, I couldn't help it.
Well, I'm really glad, and I want to thank you for sharing your story with us. And we talked about this a little bit before we started recording, but I know this is the first time you're sharing this publicly. Is that correct? Okay, so if there are any nerves or if there is anything that feels unsafe to you, we're gonna let you have that space to feel however you feel. If it's tears, you'll probably make us all cry. If it's laughter, whatever it is, we're here for it. And we want to not just in the studio be a safe space, but for our listeners to also be a safe space for you. Okay. And I also want to just tell everybody that we're going to be talking about suicide in this episode. So if this is a trigger for you or something that you just can't listen to right now, then you can know that ahead of time. So we're going to talk about your mom.
Mm-hmm.
Your mom was Brenda Leyland, and she became quite famous or infamous. I don't know which one, but in the UK before her death in 2014. So before we talk about the Madeleine McCann disappearance, tell me about your mom and what your relationship was like with her prior to that.
I mean, that's a many-layered question.
Yeah.
You know, because a relationship is, there's a past and, you know, there's a present, and then depending on where they end up and you end up, there's always this sort of retrospective, right? You know,
Right.
my journey includes sobriety. It includes many, many chapters. And I've had a lot of chances to reflect on our relationship and come to conclusions and come to terms, because in short, my mum wasn't what I needed.
Mm.
You know, she wasn't what I wanted. She was who I had.
Mm-hmm.
I spent a lot of my life in the first two deficit areas until I arrived at the third.
Right.
She was beautiful.
She was
elegant.
yes.
She was unbelievably smart, unbelievably quick. She was kooky and like pure English, childish Lewis Carroll style, you know, kind of Jabberwockian madness.
Yeah.
But she was also really challenged. And, you know...
What do you think she was challenged by?
So, I mean, it came out subsequently after her passing and after an extensive investigation into the circumstances of her passing, through a statement by her psychiatrist that she'd struggled with borderline personality and major depressive disorder like most of her life, which was the first time I was hearing about it, learning about it. Not that I didn't pick up on it, you know, like our relationship was very topsy-turvy. It was very up and down. You know, the nature of her relationship with her parents was extremely difficult. Her father, my grandfather, was a rageaholic. Her mother could be very cruel to her. My mum once asked her why, like, she called her Brenda instead of her middle name, Catherine, which is, she thought, more beautiful name. And she said, "You were never pretty enough to be a Catherine."
Oh, wow.
You know, there was some abuse that went on with her brother, my uncle, at Catholic school. I hazard a guess that some version of that happened to her. I'm not sure how or where or why, but she struggled with abandonment issues. She struggled with all sorts of just relational ups and downs constantly. I call it the dark magic dance. My mom loved me. She fought for me. But she constantly questioned whether I loved her, like I think she did everyone in her life. She pushed me away with one hand, she pulled me closer with the other, and I bathed in that messaging.
Yeah.
So I you know, like I too, like I needed her. I was not dependent. I was not independent from her. I was like a contiguous continent of mum, an enmeshed, unboundaried kind of mess.
You have siblings?
I have a brother who's 7 years older than me, biological brother, and then I have half brother and half sister and a stepsister.
And were you the only one with this relationship with your mom, or did she have it with her other children as well?
So my brother, my older brother, is the only other one in the room with that relationship. 7 years older.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think when things were really starting to go downhill for her, which was in my 11, 12, like early adolescent period, right, where she started having to go away for stints in treatment because of psychotic breaks and suicidality and suicide attempts.
Did you know that's what she was doing?
I had no idea.
So, well, how was it explained to you?
So mum and dad separated. Dad got found out for having an affair, and like, you know, he left. Didn't leave. I mean, like, we had the relationship, but like he left the family home. But then very, very soon after that, he appeared back again, staying in the guest room, and it was confusing to me. But mum had gone away. That's all I knew. Mum has gone away to get better.
Mom's got a way to get better. Yeah.
It's, you know, 30, 60, 90 days, whatever it was.
Right. Each time. And the only notion of what getting better meant was the stories that she'd tell me about
celebrities that she was in treatment with, and the Saudi prince that gave her a pair of Max Mara sunglasses from a trash bag full of sunglasses because he had a shopping addiction.
Oh, jeez.
So yeah, mental
probably,
ill health was cool.
Yeah, I would say it probably looked more glamorous to
Yeah.
you than what it was. Thank you for that. I think that gives me a better picture.
Oh, I've got the essence.
Yeah. Got the essence. We want to get rid of the essence. Tell me about the Madeleine McCann case for anyone. Like, explain it for someone who doesn't know what it was or doesn't remember.
Madeleine McCann was a little girl, almost 4 years old, on vacation with her parents in the Algarve, which is a very frequented part of Portugal for the British kind of tourists.
And they were from London or the UK?
They were from the UK.
Yeah.
Yeah. And while on vacation, they went to dinner next door. They were at a timeshare kind of place. And then when they get back, she's not there anymore. And she's never been found.
Wow. I remember that case. I remember it really well. And I remember how quickly the attention turned to her parents. First, the judgment of people who left their 4-year-old daughter alone in a strange country to go have dinner next door. And that's, I think, to be expected, because whatever parents do is always judged on, by the media and by the people reading the media, but also because the worst had happened. Because of that, this little girl had disappeared. I just remember seeing their faces, like, those paparazzi shots of people fleeing the paparazzi.
Mm-hmm.
I remember those, and I'm sure that it wasn't as closely followed here in the States as it was in the UK, because that's where she was from. Why do you think your mom was obsessed with this case? Would you call it an obsession?
Yeah.
Okay. Why do you think?
She was sending, when they kind of, when they looked at the Twitter kind of activity, that was the way in which she kind of expressed her opinions on the ongoing kind of case investigation, whatever it was. There was probably close to 2,000 tweets, as much written as re-forwarded and reshared activities in the space of a year, which, is quite an insane amount of daily activity.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think she was part of that kind of, like that old school kind of like 1950s housewife kind of culture where essentially like, she chose to be a mother, maybe. She chose to be a mother, while my dad did the thing, right? Went out and did the work and brought the money home and all of that stuff, put a roof over our heads. And I think that caused her to feel some regrets and a lack of purpose throughout her life, which, she may have sort of later reclaimed by, taking an investigative kind of approach towards this case. I mean, she called herself an investigative journalist.
Right.
Like even in sort of like documentation, like when she was asked what her job title was, I think in her insurance, it was like investigative journalist.
Wow.
That's the surface level kind of thing. But I think the deeper level is that I think she saw in Madeleine a lost, neglected, abandoned girl that in many ways she like reflected who she was, I think, the way she felt about herself. Yeah. And
then maybe also some smugness about the fact that she had dedicated herself to motherhood. And here were these parents who had left their child and the worst had happened.
That's an interesting angle. I mean, she did suffer from PPD, postpartum depression.
Yeah.
I think both with me and my brother. And I think that that sense of, I had to go through all of this.
Yeah.
I mean, especially, it's continuous with the borderline personality, which is there's up and down moods. There's that kind of resentment that comes into it. There's the sense of, victimization. So yeah, I can imagine it's like,
Yeah, I mean, just possibly, but certainly, like you said, she was the self-appointed investigative journalist. So meanwhile, you or in the States during this time, or were you still there?
I was in the States.
You were in the States, and when was this? When was the Madeleine McCann disappearance?
Well, the disappearance was in 2007. That's before I moved to the U.S.
Okay, and so when these tweets were going,
Yeah.
What year was that?
I think she started tweeting like a little while after the actual disappearance.
Okay.
And
then when did you move to the States?
I moved to the U.S. in 2008.
In 2008.
Yeah.
Okay. And you were married then, or you got married here?
I got married to a woman.
Yes.
In the U.S.
Yeah.
And which was not the right gender to be married to for me.
Right.
There's
So
the whole backstory to that.
Well, I want to talk about that a little bit, but I just wanted to insert that there so that people could see that this was happening here at the same time. You were living a closeted life.
Yeah.
With a woman that you chose to marry. You were living. Were you in L.A.?
I was in New York and then DC and then LA.
Okay. All right. So, but you were living in the States, and so your mom is back there, and she's kind of disappearing into this case, right?
Mm-hmm.
So take us through what happened after she started tweeting about it. Like, how many tweets? How often? Like, what did it look like?
So the thing about it is, there's the sort of important thing, I think, is I didn't really know. Like, it didn't become apparent to me the nature and extent of this obsession until essentially the news story was about to break.
Oh.
I my relationship with my mum cast a serious pall over my life. It cost me a relationship with my brother. It cost me a relationship with my dad. The family that came with that extended into my half brother, sister, stepsister, etc. I was living this closeted life as well, and I think some of that, was the relationship that I had with mum just starved all of the oxygen from the room and made it impossible for me to ever have my own identity. And so I got stuck in this white picket fence, middle class, stable job, get the wife kind of thing. But I was always trying to run away from her at the same time. I was trying to live up to her standards and expectations, but also to run away as far as I could.
Right.
And so when I took those calls during the week, 5,000 miles away, 2 different time zones, I was doing other things. I wasn't paying attention. Like, this is the mum that cost me so many things, and I'm just, frankly, taking a beer out of the fridge, racking up a line of cocaine and snorting it while on the phone with her and hoping that she doesn't hear it. And all of the information she's pushing my way, I'm like, okay, yeah, okay, cool.
Yeah.
So it all flew by me.
Wow. So she was immersed in this. She would call you and check in or whatever, but you were immersed in living this life that looked perfect on the outside, fortifying that life with beer and cocaine and whatever else, I'm assuming at the time. And so your investigative journalist was off. You were not thinking, what's she doing? How's she doing it? You were like, I can't deal with this. So we're going to deal on the surface level.
My job always as the son who essentially stepped into the role of husband as much as son once my dad left, and I'm left with this emotionally dysregulated mother.
Yeah.
My job was always to do whatever I could to avoid a nuclear strike of an argument that would result in weeks or months worth of us not talking.
Wow.
Deep shaming.
Wow.
Just like all sorts of hell breaking loose. So I guess I perfected over the years a way of just tapping into whatever it was that she needed to hear.
Yeah.
Just to be able to avoid, some kind of Middle East crisis between us.
Right.
Yeah,
I know, I do. Tell me what happened when she got flagged, I guess, by Scotland Yard, and explain what Scotland Yard is too for anyone who doesn't know.
Yeah, Scotland Yard is, I guess, the DOJ of England, right? I mean, it's many things, but essentially
The Department of Justice.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's an investigatory arm that brings criminal actions.
Okay. And they were investigating the Madeleine McCann case?
So they were investigating, like, sort of like at the periphery of that, there was this cadre of online sort of self-appointed investigative journalists who were sending a lot of nasty invectives around the Madeleine McCann case and around the parents who, they thought had some more of a role, not just neglect, but like they were making money off the stories, all of this stuff, serious shade. And my mum was one of these people. And so Scotland Yard was investigating this online harassment. And this is around the time that Twitter is taking off in a big way as like a forum and a vehicle for that kind of exchange.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they flagged her, and then she didn't know that she'd been flagged right away, right? Or did she?
So there's a video of her which I watched subsequently on YouTube, where essentially Sky News dispatched a team, a reporter and a cameraman, and they're outside a house, and she's walking down the street, and she's going to jump in the car with a friend and go to a gardening center, right? And Martin Brunt, the news reporter, was like, Mrs. Leyland, can we talk to you for a second? And you see this look on her face, this 15 minutes of fame. Like, I wonder what they want to talk to me about. I wonder, do I look okay?
So she wasn't suspicious.
And then we said, then it was like, can we talk to you about your Twitter account? And there's this moment, and I spent so long obsessing over this in a dark 2 a.m. methamphetamine, drunken, riddled, kind of horrible state. Well, there's this moment where you can see her face go from that excitement, that glimmer of 15 minutes of fame to, oh shit, it's over. Because then we all carry that imposter that one day they're going to find out.
Yeah.
They're going to find out the truth.
Yeah.
And it happened.
Wow.
And what happened was that the dossier that the Scotland Yard had created on these people who they were trying to go after for harassing the McCanns, I think that somehow they managed to find out who she was. Right. And what I think happened is that she was elegant, beautiful, intelligent, middle class, living in this sleepy little village of 370 people. That it's just like, it's the enemy next door story. It's the you never know who's living next door to you.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
That kind of like trust undermining press angle that they love.
Well, and that was the story. That was the story that I found.
Yeah.
Was I forgot what the headline was, but it was basically who lives next door.
Yeah.
What was the account name that she had created?
Sweepy Face.
Sweepy
It's the
Face.
name of our first boxer dog, Sweep.
Okay.
Very innocuous, almost playful handle, an avatar that she hid behind.
Sure. And people followed Sweepy Face because they were curious about the updates or what wasn't being said or what wasn't being released by the authorities.
Yeah.
They were probably very curious about what she dug up and what she thought.
Yeah.
So there was some power in that for her, right?
Yeah, I think so.
And then to be exposed in that way, to have her identity be exposed and revealed, I would think that would be disempowering because
I mean, it was it wasn't just disempowering. It completely destroyed her.
Yeah.
When
was that? When was
September 30th, 2014. Okay. I get a phone call. I'm doing my thing, going about my day, and it's just, Ben, I think I'm in really big trouble. And then I worked for a law firm at the time, and I tried to make sure that maybe the British arm of our law firm could do something with the press to gag order, to censor, to stop the photo, to whatever, anonymize this story, and that didn't play out.
Because they
were celebrating the opening, the anniversary of the opening of the London office. They were down the street in a pub, getting drunk.
Oh, so you would have had to do something right then.
The story, like I get the call September 30th. The story's most likely going to come out the next day.
Yeah.
These things move fast.
Yeah.
And the story broke the next day, and it was Twitter troll identified as Brenda Leyland, 63, whatever it is. Mm-hmm. And essentially the trail goes dead, the communications go quiet. she asks her neighbor to look after her cats, and she jumps in the car and she disappears, and she stays disappeared for a couple of days, you know, and I'm weirdly reigniting my relationship with my brother and my dad, who, you know, had been very, very difficult because of my mum, and because of the relationship, and because of the splitting of loyalties that is kind of part and parcel of the borderline personality kind of gig. Right. That my love for her was conditioned on my hatred of others, my dad, my brother. That I'm like, what's happened? Where's she gone? Do we think anything could have happened? And it starts becoming apparent that apparently there were previous suicide attempts.
Tell me what people were saying about her during that time on Twitter.
See, this is the thing, right? Is that we love these like these historical accounts of witch trials, right? We like to think that the days of attending a public execution are over. They're not. The Schadenfreude, it's not even, I mean, that word doesn't even do justice to the kind of shit, ironic and hypocritical shit that people were saying that was worse than anything Mum combined had ever said to the McCanns. They were saying that, you know, we hope you die, we hope you rot in hell. Somebody was hoping that she would get raped anally, vaginally, orally. There were, you know, pictures of her photoshopped with vampiric like teeth with blood all over her face. And some of that was after after what happened next, and I think a lot of it was before, and I think she was probably reading those tweets.
Yeah. And I think you had said that some of this was the catalyst, right? She was, not only had she been outed, but now she was publicly canceled and being crucified. So she had seen some of this either before she disappeared or during the time of her disappearance.
Yeah.
Was there any attention on you during that time or no?
That, like, once they had identified her, you know, there was this sort of like Facebook, I guess they go on social media, the press does their little, you know, they dig things up, and it was just, I think I was identified as like a 21-year-old musician from LA, which, you know, we can't be responsible for all of the mad, crazy up and down thoughts that go through our head in the time of crisis, but part of me was like, oh, well, that's nice. I'm older than that, and I wish I were a musician. But yeah, so a photo from me on Facebook was brought into it.
Sure.
You know?
Sure. All right. So then, you want to take a deep breath before you tell us what happened next?
She's gone missing, and me and my dad and my brother are back and forth on the phone, and I'm the one thinking that the worst thing has happened, and they're trying to kind of calm me down, but at the same time my brother's walked in on her trying to kill herself back in the day, so it's like it's hardly off the radar. I go to the beach on Saturday. I've been like holed up in my apartment, curtains closed, doing the drug addict dance, you know, avoiding the issue, and I go to this beach, and I think the reason I went to the beach is because we'd celebrated her birthday on that beach a year or two before, and I like ran ahead of her and I buried a present in the sand next to this rock, and it was a digital camera, and the irony of a birthday present that she loved, and then the digital camera being the thing that brought her down, wasn't lost on me. But I think some form of sympathetic magic as I was trying to coax the universe into bringing her out of hiding, right? And, you know, and she calls me, I think, on FaceTime. I have my iPad with me, and Brenda Leyland comes up on FaceTime, and I answer it, and nothing happens, and I try to call her back, and nothing happens. And I guess I'm like thinking she's putting a flare out there. She wants me to know she's okay. She just doesn't really want to talk right now. And so I celebrate, because that's what addicts do, right? Is that when things are bad, we drink, and when things are good, we drink, and when things are middle, we're bored and we drink. So I drink to celebrate the hopefully okayness of Mum, and go down actually to the beach from the cafe, not far from the rock, feeling like, okay, things are okay. And then my dad calls me, and, you know, I'm like, oh, mum tried to call, and it's like, she's dead. Like, they found her in a hotel room on the outskirts of Leicester, where she had gone and, you know, drunk and taken some pills. The thing that I think killed her was that she also had a bag and had helium canisters. And that's how, you know, that's how she killed herself. And the police probably picked up the phone and accidentally called the last number dialed, and that's the call that I got that sent me into a tailspin of, you know,
relief.
Relief, and then the confusion after that.
Right.
And yeah, I mean, like, I ran into the ocean and I kind of just tried to like hold my head. I mean, I guess I tried to like drown myself. I don't know. I didn't know what to do. The body doesn't know how to react to information like that. And I just ran into the water and submerged myself, and went over to the rock where I buried her present, and just, you know, it's just, you know, screaming mummy, you know, like the word you haven't said for years unless you're the royal family, you know. And then it's just like, this guy hugged me. I don't know who he is. I don't know what his name is. I probably wouldn't recognize him in the street if I walked past him right now. But this guy hugged me and held me close. And, you know, for someone who hadn't got any other family nearby at the time, it was a really meaningful moment. And, you know, I didn't want to go home. I didn't want to face the music. Like, England had just so much memory, so much trauma, so much scar tissue, that I'm like living in this cloud cuckoo land of like, well, maybe I'll just, you know, maybe this will go away. And rudely awakened the following morning by my dog barking on the balcony, and going out and seeing the Daily Mail and the Daily Mirror have dispatched paparazzi to my fucking house, asking me whether I had any comments, and following me down the street.
Wow.
And, you know, eventually I had to come to terms with the idea that I had to go home, and I had to face the music, and I had to, you know, put her to rest. But there was no immediate rest possible, because there had to be a coroner's investigation to determine. It's a suspicious circumstances thing. It was like, mostly it was, you know, you find someone in a hotel room, and then there's all of this news stuff, and it's like, is there something else going on here? And let's face it, in England, you know, like, this guy called Dr. Kelly went missing in the woods and was found dead after he, like, was a scientist associated with the prelude to the Iraq war, and people like, did he get killed by the government for talking about the lack of argument to go to war? So it's like, you know, it's not crazy to think that.
Yeah.
But also to try and work out whether the reporting of Sky News was what pushed her over the edge.
Well, and first of all, thank you for sharing that with us. I didn't know all those details when you and I talked before. You hadn't mentioned the guy who hugged you. Like, that's so incredible that moment happened for you at that time. And we talked about you mentioned Schadenfreude. Can you talk a little bit about the dangers of that? Because that's the joy over some harm or misfortune for others.
Yeah.
Can you just talk? Because I know that because you have now had someone taken from you. I don't know if that's how you think of it, but there was Schadenfreude, and then she was gone. So can you talk a little bit about the dangers of that?
Well, one thing quickly is that, you know, you say someone taken from you. I think the thing that people need to talk about more is that, like, you know, codependence, enmeshment, complete lack of boundaries.
Yeah.
Like, my mum destroyed me and her. It was a suicide bomb. It wasn't collateral damage. Like, she and I were the same person. I'd never really actually had an identity separate and apart from her. And so like I was a blank slate. I was just completely, I was like a shadow etching on the wall after Hiroshima. You know? So you know, she took me out as well. But the Schadenfreude thing is that, like, you know, and I've survived, and I have carved myself a path forward on the basis that binaries don't make sense. They don't work. They're not how the world operates. There is joy and there is sadness at the same time, and that they can't exist without each other. There is this interdependent, you know, paradox. That's where the truth is. That's where the beauty lies. And so, like, I get that there is a deep and a dark shadow attached to every single one of us, our unresolved, all of that shitty stuff. And that shadow exists at both the individual level and it exists at the public level. And when people somehow are not living to their fullest personal purpose and passion and potential, there is always going to be this little part of them which loves other people getting taken down a notch.
Yeah.
And it's this displacement, it's this projection. And we live in a world of 1080 by 1080 Instagram perfection of the family holiday on the beach. We don't see the picture of the argument in the car on the way over to the beach.
Right.
And so when you find someone that you can scapegoat, I mean, this is an age-old thing. I mean, the Jews were sending a goat out into the wilderness and like casting all of the sin onto the goat as a sacrifice. I mean, this isn't new. But like, that's the very basis of the media entertainment industry. It's to tap into the very darkest and worst part of us.
I completely agree. I love the actual scapegoat that you just used, and I forgot that was the reference for that. You mentioned so you were divorced at this point, right? You had gotten divorced, curtains closed, doing drugs, the drug dance, I think you called it.
Right.
What happened in your addiction after this?
The addiction had been there since a very young age. I like used to pretend to inject myself like in the arm. I rolled up paper and smoked paper. Nothing in it. I just smoked the paper.
Like how old?
Like 12. I mean, I also had other stuff going on. I had like major OCD, like serious, like I had to like, everything had to be the left or right, ones or twos. I had to touch the light switch this way. Like I had like little kind of takes. No one knew like this. I kept this all completely private, as well as this, you know, sense that I like boys.
Right.
And, but I couldn't reconcile that. I convinced myself it was a phase. The George Michael getting caught in the public bathroom, all of that information's happening at the time. I'm just like, the message is, no. That's not cool. That's not okay. And it really, I mean, as a boy exploring sexuality, like if I was masturbating and the idea of a guy popped into my head when I was trying to think of a girl, once I'd finished, I'd have to start again to balance it out. There was like an equational, mathematical
OCD
thing. OCD.
Yeah.
If I masturbate again, then I will equal out and neutralize the gay.
Oh, that's really interesting.
And so, you know, like there's a whole combination of things going on that contributed to the lie and the closeting, some of which I think trace back to some kind of experiences that I'd had, you know, in the bathtub as a kid with my mum, where there was she just didn't have any boundaries around her private parts. And so I kind of had this curiosity of a child in the nether regions of a mother that were never rebuffed or told, no, we don't do that. And it was just this thing that's stuck in my head, that was stuck in my head for a very long time and still is. And I think that this arousal template at the very beginning of my life, as well as the complete lack of affection from my mum, But this codependent dance that required me to still go back for more, like Oliver and fucking Oliver Twist is like, please may I have some more. It's like, really? You know, that when I encountered women, I encountered this mother hole, this mother vacuum, this idea that a mother would save me, or a female figure would save me, and this template, this actual physical arousal template, which caused me to have an arousal response that made my brain think, okay, cool, yeah, that's because even though at the back of my mind is like, yeah, but boys would be better,
right?
It would feel more right.
Yeah.
But I look for love in all the wrong places, you know? And so, like, the more important thing was to live up to this standard. The thing that comes with borderline personality disorder and imprinting on a woman that has that is this unstable sense of identity, which if you add that unstable sense of self-identity from BPD on top of an enmeshed codependent relationship where, like, just having no sense of one's own reality comes into play, then I was so susceptible and absorbent to any of the messages I was receiving.
Yeah.
And so it was just like, look, you got a job, you're making money. There's this girl, she's showing an interest in you, and she was fantastic. Intellectually incredible, like beautiful. And I managed to convince myself that that's what I wanted. And that it didn't work from the get-go. Even when she was running a few minutes behind on the day of the wedding, and I was thinking, have I been jilted at the altar? And I was like, well, would that be so bad? I was like, shit. Oh shit. Terminal velocity. Here we go.
Yeah.
I managed to live into that light. I managed to stuff my feelings. I managed to use cocaine and all that stuff. And so to get back to the question of where we are when mum dies and I'm left in that situation, the addiction spirals me deep, dark, downward trajectory into the belly of the whale. I spent all of my money that I'd earned, all of the money that I'd inherited on fine wine, fine dining, fine living, and the best cocaine I could find until the money ran out and meth became a more economical choice.
Yeah.
And the meth really took me to the bottom. The psychosis, the seeing shadows climbing the wall, the thinking that there's police who have nothing better to do than hang around at the end of your corridor for 4 or 5 hours in the middle of the night looking for ways to come get you, and I'm sitting there with my hands outstretched, ready to be handcuffed.
Yes. I'm laughing because I understand that feeling.
Right.
Yes.
And it's the funny thing that we as people who have faced the most terrible stories and the addicts, is that we laugh at those things that most people recoil from.
Yeah.
You know?
You said to me on the phone that sometimes it takes a tragedy to confront yourself. What did you mean by that?
It didn't really become apparent to me until the pandemic, when I was living in a 926 square foot apartment. And I kind of realized, I know that it's the writer and the poet in me, but I mean, it's that there's only so many places I can turn here before I have to turn to face myself. And
literally,
yeah, literally. And I set about the task of writing my entire life down, 600 pages.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's just because,
yeah, you were just
I'm my own worst editor.
That. Yeah.
But, it's whether you read Carl Gustav Jung or whether you read Joseph Campbell, the idea of we have to realize that we have two lives, right? I heard this once. Our second life begins the minute we realize we only have one. And it's that, sometimes it takes a complete and utter disintegration of self to eradicate the false self, the inauthentic self, that we actually have to face the darkest moment, where we're almost willing to and ready to kill ourselves. And I was on many occasions sitting in a bathtub as the warm water went tepid, and the note I'd written went unconsummated, and the dog that I had told would be okay and I would leave behind got his daddy back again, just for as long as it took for me to try it the next time.
Yeah.
And somehow I got sober. Somehow I reached a point. Somehow I knew how to ask for help. those words in the English language that some of the worst word in the English language is should.
Yes.
The idea that there's something that I should be doing or person I should be.
Mm-hmm.
And the most unbelievably helpful words in the English language, which I learned from Sino, are I need help.
Mm-hmm.
And how difficult those three words are because of the pride and all of that stuff.
And the surrender.
Yeah. And so I had to get sober. I had to get into a 12-step program, which isn't for everybody, but it worked for me. And I had to come to terms with a completely blank slate, a completely blank canvas. And I had to do some serious shadow work. I had to look at all of the worst parts of me and ask the question, where does that come from? And is that their fault? Or is that something I have failed to resolve in myself?
I'm glad you didn't say, is it my fault? Because I know that as a life coach, you know that's really harmful verbiage. But I love that idea that this is something that's historical, given to you by someone else, or this is something that can be solved by you, and that there's work involved. We're coming down to time, so I want to ask you two more questions. You're a life coach now. That's part of what you do. You talked about working on the hotline, the suicide hotline. Is that right? And tell me about that first call you got.
So the Trevor Project actually calls it the Suicide Lifeline.
Lifeline, thank you.
Yeah, look, the Trevor Project is one of the most incredible organizations that I've ever had the privilege to work with and donate to. The ages of below the age of 25, LGBTQ plus people who are struggling with everything but suicide, right, is the main thing. You do extensive training, but nothing prepares you for what happens when you're on the phone with someone.
Yeah.
And I pick up the phone and it's Trevor Project, this is Ben, what's going on? And I hear there's this wind and I hear the rat-a-tat-tat of a railway track, and this voice starts talking to me and it's I'm going to jump in front of the train. And, we're talking, they're genderqueer, and someone very, very close to them killed themselves about 7 or 8 months before that. And they want to kill themselves, and they struggle with alcohol and they struggle with drugs, and it's difficult. There's 5 or 6 people on the line with you at any one time, right? 5 or 6 other people that could take that call. And I was the only one that was able to meet this person where they were.
Yeah.
The suicide and the drugs and the alcohol and the sexuality and the gender identity. It was my God, my higher power, my unified field of consciousness and synchronicity put me in that situation. And I got to realize that my mum's death, I would want her to be back right now sitting next to me. I mean, she is in many ways, but she set me free. She knew that I couldn't be who I was meant to be until she was gone. And she gave me and endowed me with so much wisdom. And if it weren't for her, I wouldn't have been able to connect with someone that was about to kill themselves. Yeah. And she walked back from the railway and she gets in the car and we're actually joking about my dog Chief farting at the time. And Serena
yeah.
here. And she agrees, maybe I'll give my sponsor a call. Maybe, it's been a while since I spoke to my sponsor. Now, I don't know what happened. You have to not get invested in the outcome. You can't actually be the one to call them back the next day if they're up for receiving a call back. But that day, in that moment, I call it spiritual composting, which is that all of the depravity and the sadness and the misery and the nasty, rotten shit Like, that's what makes up compost. And that it's our job to take all of that. It's our job to tell the terrible stories.
Yeah.
Because there are people out there that think theirs is the worst, or that no one else would understand. And it's just not true.
That they're the only ones.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that story. I love that that was your first call. And I agree that everything that you went through, that you are, that all your experiences allowed you to be something in that moment that no one else could have been. The last thing I want to ask you is, we talked at the top about how you haven't told this story publicly. Can you tell us why you chose to tell it now?
I had a writing mentor. I still have a writing mentor, I suppose, called Jill Sherry Robinson.
She was a guest on the show.
Yeah.
You know that. Yeah.
Yeah. And she's a powerhouse. And I was telling her when I began to write the story, to get my head around everything that happened, to do the healing. And I said, I'm not sure that I want to tell this story because it's too terrible. It's too hurtful. And she said, that's exactly why you have to tell it.
Mm.
The terrible stories are the only stories that we should be telling.
Wow.
And it took me, I'm deeply committed to healing, to helping people heal. I'm deeply committed to the queer community, deeply committed to the mental health community. And I felt like I owed it to the people that I think that I've been put here to help, to at least be able to talk about the story and explore all of the various things that come up in that story with a level of concision and thought and deliberateness. And I feel like I'm at that point now.
Yeah.
And also, I think I'm on the cusp of a new chapter in my life. And sometimes you've got to know how to end the chapter before it, before you can start the next one.
I love that too. And I'm just thinking, like, here you are sitting in the studio in front of us, sober, authentic, and you're a writer, you're a life coach, you're just so many things that, like, you were made to do this. You were made to tell this story, and you told it so beautifully, Ben. And for the first time, I'm stunned by your composure, by how you found the right words. You know, you really articulated it well, but beyond that, there was like the spiritual composting, right? That's just so beautiful and so visual. Thank you. Thank you for coming here, for being brave enough, for taking that courage that you've created and accumulated along the way and used it to share the story with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I mean, you know, this story has been told in pieces to people in my support network. Yeah. And if there's one thing that anyone takes away from this, it's just like picking up the phone and blowing things out and just saying, hey, this is coming up. Like having friends like I never had friends. Before I got sober, I had using companions, acquaintances.
Yeah.
So I've been held and seen and heard. And I wouldn't be sitting here if I hadn't been.
Mm. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Benjamin Leyland, and I'm the only one explaining why their mother's suicide almost killed them too.